Hello, everyone. We are going to give just a moment to allow everybody to kind of get into the room, and then we will get started. All right, so as those numbers start to slow down, we'll get going here. So welcome everyone to the IAPP web conference, Weathering the Storm, Building an Effective Privacy Budget, Improving ROI in 2023, sponsored by Transcend. My name is Marjorie Boyer, and I am a speaker and programming coordinator here at the IAPP. I'll be your host for today's program, and we'll be getting started in just a moment. But before we do, just a few program details. Participating in today's web conference will automatically provide IAPP certified privacy professionals who are the named registrants with 1 CPE credit. A copy of today's web conference will be available in your My IAPP, My Purchases, My Recordings portal within 48 hours. And please feel free to post any questions you have for the panelists in the Q&A area at the bottom of the screen. So now on to our program, and I would like to introduce today's panelists, Catherine Parker, Chief Operating and Chief Marketing Officer at Transcend, and Brandon Wiebe, Head of Privacy and General Counsel at Transcend. It's a pleasure to have you both, and we are looking forward to this conversation. So with that, I will hand it on over to Brandon and Catherine.
Wonderful. It's great to be here. We're excited to chat with you about budgets, about preparing for your budgets as you move forward into 2023. We're obviously just coming off of the backdrop of quite a bit of financial movement that has certainly kept your financial partners busy over the past few days. And so bringing that experience in, as well as thinking about the road ahead, we're excited to chat with you. Great to be here with everybody.
Yeah, likewise, Kate and Morgan, great to be here with both of you. And always a sort of complicated and tricky issue for privacy professionals in any market conditions. But I think very top of mind for a lot of privacy professionals right now, thinking about how they're going to plan for the back half of the year and gear up for 2024 as well. So excited to dig into this today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. My name is Morgan, and I'll be moderating today's conversation about building an effective privacy budget against the backdrop, as Kate and Brandon mentioned, of challenging and pretty uncertain economic times. If you're new to Transcend, we're the platform that helps companies put privacy on autopilot, making it easy to encode privacy across an entire tech stack. So for those of you who are interested in learning more about Transcend, we'll also have a special offer to share at the end of the session. So to give you a little more background on Kate and Brandon, Kate Parker is Transcend's Chief Operating Officer. She's been an executive at technology companies like Uber and Google, and she's also served as an advisor to growth stage and public companies, and is a 10-year plus board member of 2 institutions. Brandon is Transcend's General Counsel and Head of Privacy. Brandon was also the Associate General Counsel of Privacy for Technology Company Segment and Lead Product Counsel for Twilio. So thank you so much for both. Thank you both of you for being here, and great to have you. In terms of how we'll structure today, we'll start with some baseline best practices. We won't be here for too long, but for those of you who are building a budget for the first time, this will help to provide some context. Then we'll move on to how to determine and amplify the downstream ROI of privacy initiatives. Next, we'll move on to why automation is a critical piece for weathering this, again, uncertain economic climate. And then we'll close it out with how to create and nurture strategic internal relationships that will help you get more support for your own budget initiatives. So to kick things off, to get the conversation going, we'd love to run a quick poll. So let us know at your company, what has been your biggest roadblock to getting the privacy budget you need? And we'll give it about 20 seconds as some of these responses roll in. So this is really interesting. They're honestly pretty evenly matched. Difficulty articulating ROI came up in front, which fits in really well with especially the second part of this session. And then lack of leadership buy-in is second, current economic conditions third. So all those answers really help to set the framework for, what everything we're about to get into. So thanks for those responses. So Brandon, pulls back in front. I will send this first question to you. For somebody just starting out, what top level advice would you give on how to get the budget you need?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Morgan. So I think regardless of where you are in the budgeting cycle process, whether you're thinking about trying to add budget or request a line item or a resource mid-cycle, or whether you're starting off a whole new budgeting process for a new year, I think it's really important to learn your organization's process really well, really early on. So particularly at large organizations, I would say the budgeting process can be really complex and has a ton of moving parts. So I think one step in any budgeting process is to understand exactly how it works, what the different milestones are in that process, who has the ultimate approval over your line items. And so starting to ask these questions early on to get a sense of how these decisions will be made is going to put you in a better position to be able to advocate. I think it's also important to understand what the impact of your team getting more budget means for the business as a whole. So for a lot of organizations, budgeting is a zero-sum game. And if you're going to effectively advocate for a line item, it helps you to know what that budget is going to be taken away from, because that gives you your manager's context and your manager's context on what your request looks like in light of everything else. So understanding the process really early on, really well, will help you. The second thing I'd say is it's important to backward plan into the specific resource requests you're going to make. So you're going to need to start by building a strategic vision for your own privacy organization. And the way I like to think about this is, what is it that you want to accomplish or need to accomplish in the next year, the next 6 months, the next quarter? And take that vision of where you want to be and ask yourself, how does it align with your organization's goals? At the end of the year, what OKRs or projects will you have accomplished? What does your privacy organization look like at that point in terms of its maturity? And if you're able to build that strategic vision and tie that to your company's OKRs, then you can start to back plan into, well, what are the specific tasks that need to happen? What are the specific resources I need to have in place in order to be able to accomplish that? And then the third piece I'd say is to get decision makers on board really early in the cycle. So if the first time you mention a new software line item or a new resource is when you're submitting a budget proposal to your manager, you've probably waited too long. As early as you can in the cycle, start thinking about what resources you'll need. And so going through that strategic planning vision is important. And then sharing that vision with your manager and helping them see what the organization ought to look like on X date in the future will get them bought into that vision. And so then when you back into the specific line items that you're asking for, they can understand kind of why the request is there and what the trajectory of your organization is going to be. And I think that's going to make you much more successful in being able to advocate for specific requests and tie them to something more concrete and long-term rather than just sort of be abstract line item requests.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the wisdom I hear a lot when it comes to budgets is ask early and ask often. So that definitely aligns. Oh, all right, here we go. So Kate, how can somebody frame their budget request in terms of ROI, and why is that framing so important?
It's such a good question. And before I answer that, I actually just want to take a step backwards and just talk for a minute about why ROI. This might be an obvious statement, but as a P&L owner, you think exclusively in terms of return on investment, which is the total value divided by the cost, which is perhaps an obvious statement, but I think for folks who are working with P&L owners, whether you're working directly, as Brandon said, with a P&L owner, such as your manager or a VP or an SVP, who's able to approve budget requests, or you're working cross-functionally with your finance department, a few other orgs that you're bringing in to help fund your privacy program. It's incredibly important to think about your structure and your asks in terms of your return on investment. What was interesting to me about the poll is it's very clear in privacy that there can be challenges articulating visions, goals, programs, and structures in terms of hard cents and dollars in a way that you can convert into an ROI calculation. So to start on that backdrop, I think creating a mindset where you've really taken on a P&L ownership view in terms of being able to structure all of your items in an ROI model is incredibly important. Thinking about how to break down your budget requests into that is an exercise that does require quite a bit of collaboration. I'll just give a few examples to help kind of bring to light how I might think about ROI for a specific program. When I look at actually quantifying ROI with cash savings, I'm going to look program-wise to break down each individual mission or objective that I have, and then look at the impact for what it is costing the business currently and what it might cost the business if we go with alternative options, solutions, setups, or strategies. And then I'm going to think about how those solutions or strategies that I have put together save the business money or create a strong return on investment. I think what is really interesting to note is that when we look at CFOs, finance orgs, increasingly, those folks are viewing themselves as risk managers for the business. They think about ROI and they think about reducing risk as one of those ROI metrics. So if I can identify, as an example, an area where my privacy program is helping to reduce potential exposure on fines, that's a very clear ROI calculation to make. I'm looking at the number of potential infractions. I'm looking at the number of users we have. I'm looking at the potential fines and various regulations. I'm running those calculations and understanding potential exposure in a dollars and cents perspective. And then I'm putting any of my mitigation strategies against that calculation. Similarly, I'm looking at things like automation, structure of program costs. For example, am I looking at how many requests we are getting quarter over quarter, 2021 Q4 to 2022 Q4, and then projecting scale beyond that? Looking at cost of salary against handling each of those individual requests, the way that our processes are set up. You can start to back into pretty specific calculations and tie dollars and cents to elements of the program. What I like to recommend for folks on ROI and quantification is to start with a spreadsheet where you're looking at daily, ongoing, potential one-time. You're structuring your privacy program against that, and then you're looking at your ROI calculations or any of your costs or potential savings that could exist across your elements and items. And then another great thing to do is look for revenue growth, and that does exist in privacy. The particular place we see this the most is on the business-to-business side. So we understand that there are folks who are working very closely with their sales organizations, understanding where privacy is playing a role in contract closing, new revenue coming in for the business. On the consumer side, there's a lot of emerging work happening with folks working closely with their marketing team to model out impact of increased trust and privacy in terms of new product launches, entering new regions, and being able to drive business. Those can and the marketing team is very good at creating specific explanations for how and if privacy can have an impact on driving consumer revenue. And then similarly on the B2B side, working with your sales organization to understand if privacy is having an impact on your contracts, your size of customers, your ability to break into enterprise and close deals and revenue on behalf of your company. So that's the way I would think about it to start, but happy to dive into more detail. I know ROI is incredibly top of mind for people, particularly on a backdrop of a hard year to ask for budget and wanting to put best foot forward on a privacy program.
Absolutely. It's a lot of great insight and examples there. Thank you. So Kate, this one's also for you. Given the current economic climate, how can someone position privacy automation as a favorable option?
So what's interesting here is that we're already seeing finance and P&L owners look at automation as a way to create more efficiency and more risk reduction within a business. So that is a larger trend outside of privacy. When you look at top CFO reports, studies in terms of what folks are looking at for the year ahead, as an example, PwC mentions that over 50% of CFOs are looking to accelerate digital transformation and adoption throughout their company. So that's something that is probably aligned at a higher company level, and it will be important to understand where your business sits within digital transformation and adoption for efficiency. Working closely on that, I think the wonderful thing about automation is it creates a very clear calculator to understand what the cost of running your current program with manual inputs versus what automation can potentially save you. And again, I would think about it in two ways. The first is your reduction of cost. So you might look at, as an example, whether you have your customer success team handling data privacy requests. Is that a manual input? You can sit with your customer success leader. You can model out how they think about each of the quantification of the time spent for each of their customer success agents, how many reports they are handling and clearing. There's lots of great ways and structures to take that as dollars and cents and then compare it to what an automation process would do for your company and compare those investments versus the current structures that you have set up. So again, I encourage people to look at and track, if you aren't already, things like the scale of your requests, quarter over quarter, month over month, week over week, the costs underlying your processing. That includes people costs, times, lost hours across department, legal, privacy program managers, engineering organizations. Create, salary flows into that. So you're understanding the drivers of all of those elements. And then look at that total cost. Being able to go to your finance department to say, we want to invest in automation for X price, but we also understand that we will be saving the business Y price, is a great way to structure the conversation. And your finance leader, who might not be in the details of privacy, will certainly understand digital transformation and automation from a larger perspective based on their other priorities across the company.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you mentioned it a little bit in one of your previous responses, but can you talk a little bit more about how folks can make inroads at tying their privacy initiatives to revenue growth?
Absolutely. So the first thing that I would do is understand your industry. So let's take business to business. In the business to business capacity, the best place to look for alignment to revenue growth is understanding the impact that privacy has on your sales process. We have seen time and time again that folks who sit with and uncover impact within their sales department are able to tie their privacy impact and initiatives to sales outcomes. And by that, I mean very specifically being able to close new business based on the privacy program and the privacy structure. So we have examples of folks who have worked with certain privacy programs and structures, have been able to partner with sales teams. Perhaps there's a pending deal in the pipeline. Perhaps there's a new segment that the sales team would like to go after. Perhaps they'd like to break into the healthcare industry and serving healthcare clients. Perhaps they'd like to move into the financial industry and serving financial clients. Perhaps there's a strategic priority at your business to move higher up into the enterprise. Enterprise obviously has more rigorous and stringent examples for how they'd like to see privacy structured with their vendors. So being able to work together on that, you're able to not only chart a course for your privacy program that aligns to the top of your business vision, but you're also able to very concretely show your impact. Something marketing source attribution is a term that's thrown around a lot. I don't know why we wouldn't be seeing privacy source attribution, particularly on the sales side moving forward. And I encourage people to have those conversations with their head of sales. Obviously, on the business to consumer side, we talked a little bit about working with your marketing team and your product leaders to model out the impact that privacy can have on your revenue growth. Large companies do this all of the time. When we think about rolling out new technologies, being invited by consumers into new aspects of their lives, being able to provide consumers with new benefits, and new structures, privacy concerns do come up. And so being able to understand with your marketing team what it would look like to invest in an enhanced privacy program, what impact that might have on direct-to-consumer sales or consumer growth within a particular category. So looking at all of those products that you are already worried about from a privacy program and sort of adding a different lens to it. The risk mitigation piece, certainly, but also how you can enhance the privacy element as well, and how that can drive underlying growth. That's something, again, across the time series that you would be able to see impact on, sort of the pre and post impact of an improvement of a privacy program in combination with your marketing team. You'll be able to model that out and show direct contribution on the revenue growth side as well.
Absolutely. And Brandon, we have not forgotten about you. Kate talked a good amount about cost reduction and revenue growth, but what other arguments can people use to make their budget requests more compelling?
Yeah, I mean, so I would start by echoing everything that Kate said. I think tying your budget requests to your company vision and to those goals can be quite compelling. And to Kate's point, there's so much Venn diagramming over what the privacy program is trying to accomplish and what your sales team is trying to accomplish, what your marketing team is trying to accomplish, that there is a lot of opportunity to be able to drive privacy growth and privacy operational efficiency by tying it to these broader company goals. I would say, while that should be the way that you lead and focus on building a budget case, it's okay to also use the fear of regulatory penalties as a stick to advocate for resources. But if you do that, you will need to spend some time educating your finance team and other budget decision makers on what those risks actually are. And this requires spending some time and some effort to try to actually quantify those risks. Talking about them abstractly is really difficult, and the chance that your finance team has any sort of deep understanding of the nuance of privacy law and privacy risk, given how much it's shifting and how many new regulations are coming out, is probably unlikely. And so they're going to be relying on you to articulate those. Companies have a whole different variety of ways of approaching how to identify and mitigate risk. But what I have found effective is a really simple method of just scoring identified risks in terms of likelihood to occur, multiplied by the scope of impact if it did occur. And if you use this calculus, it's a really good starting point to begin to identify specific risks and articulate them and stack rank them. And you can use that to begin to show your finance team what the ongoing cost to the business is of actually carrying those risks on an ongoing basis.
Absolutely. I think like finding ways to quantify these kind of intangible things is so powerful. And that definitely is a good segue into our next question, which is focused on metrics. Data and hard numbers are so critical for making a compelling case. So Brandon, what metrics do you recommend privacy professionals focus on?
Yeah, great question. And so I think as Kate was talking about, looking at the way that the privacy program can drive revenue, the metrics that I look at are things like the number of DPAs an organization negotiates and the value of the deal for each one of those, the number of privacy inquiries from a customer that led to a close-won deal and the value of that deal. Also, tracking the number of privacy inquiries you had in the middle of a deal that led to a close-loss deal, and what was the value of that your business didn't realize. And so starting to actually track those quantifiable metrics can help you get a sense of how important, from a pure dollars perspective, privacy compliance is to your organization. The other metrics to look at are where your current resource draws are and how automation and process improvements and your request for budget can actually drive efficiencies. So if you're going to do that and make that sort of case, you have to start with some baseline. And so baseline metrics that I would be looking at are how many third-party audits are you having to respond to? And how much time is that taking the teams that respond to those, whether it's a CX team or a security team? What are the number of data impact assessments that you have to perform? And how much time is that taking in terms of person hours? And you can actually then translate that into a resource dollars amount. And then a one that comes up for a lot of businesses, especially large customer-facing businesses, is how much time are you spending processing data subject access or delete requests? If your customer support team is handling all of these and having to manually go and search for data subject records to respond to these requests, what is that costing the business? Begin to quantify that and see what those baseline metrics are so you can begin to build a case for moving to automation. And I'd say, like, in that line of thinking, don't just look at the resource draws to your team specifically, your privacy team. Look at how current processes are actually costing other teams time. And you can use that to show how your budget request is actually going to alleviate pressure on other teams. And that's a good way to start building allies and finding advocates on in other parts of the organization cross-functionally that can help push for your privacy line items.
Absolutely. Thanks for so much detail there. So moving on to the topic of creating and nurturing internal relationships within your org. Kate, from the perspective of a COO, where so much of your role is focused on facilitating, excellent cross-functional cooperation, what advice would you give folks looking to build internal relationships to support their initiatives?
Yeah, this makes me really excited because I would say I definitely, I get incredibly pumped when I think about org leaders working cross-functionally in the best interest of the business. And I know that folks are consistently doing that, but there's always farther to go when it comes to connection points, understanding overlap, having that viewpoint of how things intersect. And I have a lot to say on this. So I'm gonna run through a few things. The first is that I believe that anyone who wants to ask for an investment from the company is responsible for owning soup to nuts org development and org interrelated operations. And by that, I mean proactively understanding the rest of your business, understanding what all of the rest of your org leaders care about, learning, asking questions. How does privacy impact your day-to-day? Does it come up for anyone on your team? Do you feel that you do anything related to privacy? Asking each of your leaders across your company those types of questions to find those connection points and those intersections that you perhaps knew about, but weren't able to quantify or articulate or hear played back to you from your cross-functional stakeholders. So I'd say the first thing is that you're responsible for the org development to create that privacy network. And I would flip that, because traditionally, I think when we say that, we mean going to folks and trying to convince them about privacy. But what I'm saying very specifically is going to them and asking them, where is privacy already naturally coming up for you when I'm not in the room? Are your sales folks having to answer privacy questions? Are your CX agents having to field privacy related components? Are your engineers having to dedicate an hour a month to handle a privacy related task? And understanding and getting all of that input is the first thing I would think about. The second thing is it really helps to understand different org perspectives. And I think in the context of our current economic participants and thinking through that structure, understanding how people from your finance org are thinking about economic uncertainty and business protection is incredibly helpful. Finance has to think about protection of the business at an 100,000-foot view level. They are thinking through everything related to salaries, travel, entertainment, technology investments, offsites, onsite, like everything across the board. It's all boils down to a dollar on a spreadsheet or in a model for your finance department. So they are looking at things from such an abstracted level that I think it can be really helpful to get into that mindset in order to build better relationships and understand how your specific request impacts or will be seen through that relationship and through that partnership. The third idea, get creative. I think that there is a ton of room to grow across privacy for getting creative on ROI. So as I mentioned earlier, my first step whenever I personally in my career have asked for budget, and I typically ask on a non-rolling basis, which I can talk about later, but I go through and I create a spreadsheet mapped to my vision and my programs, and I hunt for ROI. I hunt for calculations. I hunt for dollars and cents. I look for salaries that I can tie to. I look for increments of time that I can tie to. I look for any quantification possible on anything related to my program. And I look to get as creative as possible for understanding how I can push it farther. Whether that's working with the marketing team on a new survey to understand how I can quantify my impact there, or working with my product team to understand if they have anything related to the ROI perspective. The last two things I say are on the fourth side, I would consider that there's always rolling budget. As I mentioned before, I, as a P&L owner, have always submitted my budget and created my long-term annual plan in partnership with my cross-functional peers and my finance leaders. But I've never let that stop me from going after rolling budget when I know that there has been a change in my ROI calculation that directly impacts or fuels the business, because I know that it is my responsibility to continue to look for those moments. And when that ROI changes, I'm going and I'm asking for a different ROI ask related to a different investment. So that's something that I would consider thinking about as well. You're responsible and you know best for when your ROI has changed, and being able to navigate that on the fly can be incredibly helpful for your business as well, and for changing your underlying impact on your business. And then the last thing I will say is that I really do believe that there are more champions than you know. There are folks out there, and they might be hiding at any level across your business. Your VP of sales, as an example, might say, privacy never comes up. And you might find the one person selling to the one segment in the one region where privacy comes up quite a bit, and understanding their relationship with privacy and the impact that they see having a better privacy program will have on their role, and being able to quantify that and boil that back up. I'm seeing this in this very specific jurisdiction with this very specific component. Is this something that might actually be replicated across the rest of the sales org? There are more champions out there than you think, and being able to find them and gather that evidence and then roll it back up can be incredibly beneficial for getting you the resources that you need and being able to really communicate that to your cross-functional executives and the rest of your leadership team for why privacy matters. So that was a lot, and I obviously get very jazzed about this, but I'm excited to chat with anyone who has further questions on building internal relationships.
Thanks, Kate. I love that answer. I really think this topic is a little undervalued when it comes to the conversation about budget. So I love to see the excitement. Brandon, if you could walk us through kind of the same topic, but what was your process for, all of these things that Kate mentioned? What's I guess a basic process for going out to build those strategic relationships?
Yeah, and Kate, these are such good strategies that I will be leveraging when I submit my budget to you. Such fantastic information. So in terms of building cross-functional alliances, to Kate's point, I think step one really starts with a listening exercise and going out and actually understanding before you can advocate. So this is a process of going out and identifying areas of overlap between what other teams are already working on and your privacy organization's goals. And as Kate says, I think you're going to find that there is a lot more overlap than you might initially expect. And even if you don't find it immediately, I think with a little bit of digging, you will identify some clear things. I'll just give a few examples of where this has come up for me in my career. So going and asking the marketing team or understanding what their current brand initiatives are. Are they working on any projects related to customer experience and success and building a more cohesive trust brand? This could be as simple as they're redesigning the user experience on the website to make it easier to use, more customer focused and friendly. You might have a shared goal with them if that's what they're working on, to do things like eliminate dark patterns, clarify your privacy notice. Another one that has come up that Kate mentioned a bit was, does sales want to close deals with more heavily regulated industries? And so tracking things like how many customers come in and ask whether you're HIPAA compliant or can sign a business associate agreement. If sales is trying to drive into those areas or has an OKR to go after a particular vertical or industry that might be more regulated, that's a perfect Venn diagram for you to identify a mutual goal. Or on cost operations and reduction, does your finance or product or engineering team want to increase their margins or lower tech debt? That's a perfect example where a data mapping exercise and data minimization project could really have a broader margins impact on your business. So I think once you go through and dig into this and listen to what other teams' goals are, you are going to be able to find a lot of nuggets of where a privacy initiative fits really squarely within what other teams are trying to accomplish. So that's kind of step one, is this listening exercise. And then step two for me is if you can't advocate or you can't win your own budget, particularly on a rolling basis, if you're mid-cycle, there could be opportunities after this listening exercise to leverage other teams' budgets. So once you've identified this overlap with other teams' goals, are there common tasks that you could accomplish together? The security one is a perfect example because security teams often have their own independent data mapping exercises for security purposes that you can get a bang for your buck and do a 2-for-1 sort of project with that team and actually leverage security budget to accomplish this. And so I think even the ability to co-opt resources from engineering as you're standing up broader privacy infrastructure is a perfect example of how you can leverage other teams' resources and other teams' budgets to accomplish this shared set of goals. So that's what I really look for when you're building a cross-functional relationship with these different organizations. is finding this Venn diagram of shared goals and then being able to leverage the resources that are available to still be able to accomplish your privacy initiatives as well.
Definitely. Thanks so much for that valuable insight, Brandon. We'll be moving on to Q&A in just a couple minutes here, but Brandon, do you want to leave us with any closing thoughts?
Yeah, just before we get into Q&A, I guess the final thing I'd say is that as privacy practitioners, we can get really focused on the specific details of the regulatory requirements and the technical work streams that are required for us to meet those requirements. That's really important for us in our day-to-day tactical work to know that. But it's really hard for us to talk about privacy in those terms with our cross-functional colleagues and expect them to appreciate all that level of nuance and detail. It can be hard for them to contextualize the nuance of what a sell or share under CPRA means in the scope of the broader work that they're focused on. And in some ways, empathizing and understanding what other teams are, how they view the world is a great gateway into us being able to better articulate privacy. In that frame, I would say, when we talk about privacy broadly, contextualizing it as an individual right, a human right, or a project of building trust is something that a lot of people understand much more implicitly than the technical nuance of how a specific tracker is working on your site, or whether we have an exception to fulfilling this particular DSAR request. So talking about strategic goals as a privacy organization and tying it to broader goals as a business that is focused on a better customer experience and securing human and individual rights is going to build, I think, a lot more advocates and help contextualize a lot of the work that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. Kate, same question to you. Any closing thoughts?
I loved all of Brandon's thoughts. I will add my own to say that I think for me, it starts with the compelling vision that you have for your privacy program. Is it aligned to your company's long-term goals and objectives? Is it something that you feel will benefit the company in the near term and the long term? And if you start with your vision, can you begin to break down your programs and your incremental milestones to get you to that vision and bring people along that process? And I think to Brandon's point, being able to shift or add to the mindset of the very real and ongoing risk reduction, risk mitigation that needs to happen on a daily basis. But if you can create that compelling long-term vision and start to run your org or your team alongside of that growth, you will be able to unlock ROI quantification and have ROI-driven conversations throughout your business with that mindset. And I believe that that will be so incredibly helpful for making sure that companies benefit long-term from privacy gains and from strong privacy programs. It will also have the awesome and immediate effect of making you a more compelling advocate for your budget and your program and your team by having that vision, understanding those programs, and being able to speak to each of those programs and each of those investments in an ROI-driven manner. Obviously, finding the ROI takes work. There is no magic bullet. Again, as I've said, I will say it 3 times. I do believe very strongly that putting your program into an Excel sheet and looking for your quantification. If you need a resource on this, we actually have one. But I think that actually going through each of these elements and saying, daily, is there a loss of efficiency here? Can I tie it to a salary? Weekly, ongoing, is there a risk that the company is holding? What is the actual dollar size of that risk that the company is holding? And do we have a mitigation in plan If not, does an investment in a mitigation plan help to increase our ROI because it reduces our exposure to this risk? It's a line by line exercise. And to Brandon's point, it requires going out and listening and learning and finding those nuggets. But once you start to detail that impact and detail that ROI, all of your subsequent work to ask for budget, to align to other people's budgets, to get resources near term or long term become much easier. And then the last thing I will say is that there are more privacy champions out there. They might be hiding in your organization. I know that many of the conversations folks are having, it can be seen as privacy as sort of the no or the stop or the brakes. But it is true that in certain pockets, and for some companies, you might be lucky, they might be your leadership or your executive team or your board. In other companies, they might be your frontline workers who are actually draining resources for your company, and they could use the help and the investment to do their job better. If you find those champions at all levels in organizations and harness them and pull them into your privacy program mission, you will be able to have a better impact than just working from your team's vantage point alone. So I'm excited for you. I'm excited for your work, particularly on the backdrop of an incredibly challenging year. But just remember, CFOs view their jobs as risk reduction. Over 50% of CEOs in a Deloitte survey said that they believe that they are responsible for risk management. That's a great overlap with privacy. And also more than 50% of CFOs in a PwC survey said that they believe that they are responsible for digital transformation and adoption. So if that, an investment in technology and improving your privacy at the code layer is something that is important to you, you might have an ally with your finance department, or certainly they are used to understanding automation and digital adoption and can help you work through how to think about your total cost of investment and how to think about your program and structure it for success.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for joining us and sharing your valuable perspective. Now we'll turn and see if we have any questions from the audience. Here we go. Let's see. All right, so we got one coming in. They're asking, budget cycles just ended and I don't have any budget. What can I do now?
Well, I would leverage Brandon's idea to start. You didn't receive budget. I'm sorry that happened. That's not ideal. I'm sure you had some very important things on that list, and now you're having to think creatively about how to get them done. Doing your listening tour and aligning to other people's budgets. I have in my personal career had quite a bit of my own org stuff paid for by other organizations. It is an incredibly underutilized and effective tactic, particularly orgs where they have large enough budgets where they actually receive, and some orgs do receive, an overage based on unplanned initiatives throughout the year. So a 5%, 10%, 20%. Some folks have that built in to be able to give them their flexibility. If you work in a company where that doesn't exist, depending on the org size, there might still be particular projects or programs. And Brandon, you offered two great examples: website redesign or development for ease or smoothing, or working with security on a data mapping exercise. You might be able to team up and put your budget to work, put someone else's budget to work for your privacy perspectives. Brandon, I don't know if you had any additional thoughts on that. I thought your items there were so great.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. For the short term, that's a really effective strategy when you are the subject of a budget cut, or you didn't get all of the requests that you had put in this last cycle. Looking for that overlap and leveraging other teams' budgets, I think is really helpful. I would also say, don't let the current state of economic affairs discourage you away from the hard ongoing work of advocacy in your organization. You should be thinking about that long-term strategic vision for the end of 2024 right now, and beginning to back plan and build that case now and start to foster those champions. Privacy advocacy and those initiatives are not just a one-time during the budget cycle thing. They have to be an ongoing process and an ongoing feedback loop. And it just happens that there is oftentimes a one time a year, couple times a year decision-making process that codifies that into a budget. But you should be preparing now for what the end of the year looks like and what next year looks like, and beginning to foster those champions right now.
Awesome answers, guys. And it kind of bleeds into the next question that we got, which I really like, which is, what if privacy is not even a consideration within my organization? There are only ad hoc processes with little to no ownership, no buy-in from management, no awareness of how necessary it is for the org. How would you request for budget?
I'd love to jump on this one just because this has been my own personal experience at 2 technology companies launching programs without budgets and without existing structures. The first question that I have for you is, are you passionate about leading this? And are you passionate about seeing this through? Because if the answer is yes, then what you need to do is utilize all of the strategies that we've talked about in today's session, finding your champions, understanding your details, putting together your business case. If you are passionate to drive that through, you can succeed at getting budget. It might need to be parked under a P&L owner. So as an example, you might need to find a business general manager or your next closest proxy. Perhaps your VP of marketing cares very deeply about trust and is willing to sort of serve as your budget authority. Your budget might get parked under someone, and you might be responsible for running your program details through that person in a dotted line, but you can succeed at getting resources without the necessary authority of having a fully formed privacy budget and office. But it starts with whether or not you're passionate about leading that. And if so, utilize those strategies. Feel free to reach out to me. You can be successful here. It just takes a little bit more work without the built-in authority of a title or an office.
Yeah, would echo everything that you just said, Kate. I would also add that we shouldn't always just assume that everybody knows why privacy is important. And I think there are a lot of folks individually understand privacy in the context of themselves, and what it means for their own personal information to be private, but they may not understand that in the context of their business or a specific organization. And so again, as part of that advocacy work, going back and understanding what your organization's broader goals and vision are, and looking for ways that privacy helps your business accomplish those things, is going to begin to educate your organization on why privacy is important. But I think, in the short term, in lieu of having a fully set up privacy function that is a standalone P&L in your business, as Kate says, leveraging other programs, other P&L is a good way to start while you're doing that long-term education work and advocacy work.
Great, thank you for that, Brandon and Kate. I don't see any other questions here, so I'll go ahead and move on. Before we sign off today, we wanted to extend an offer to those interested in learning a little more about Transcend and how we can help solve the issues we've talked about today. 1, helping your teams reduce the human overhead of privacy, and 2, delivering cost optimization across your teams. And as an example of that in real life, we helped one client save over $7 million in total privacy costs with Transcend, and we'd love to help your team too. So for registrants of today's webinar, if you take a meeting with Transcend, before the end of the month, we'll send you a $50 USD Amazon gift card or the equivalent in local currency. There's no action required. Our team will be in touch in the next day or 2. So just respond to that email and jump on a call before April 7th to be eligible. But Brandon, Kate, thank you both again for being here. great insights, fantastic perspective, and I think it was really valuable.
Thank you, Morgan. This was great. Feel free to reach out directly. Great ROI on a $50 gift card. We're just also happy to hear about your vision for your privacy program, what you're up to. It's great to meet folks as well, just throughout the community. So excited to continue the conversation. Thank you for having me, Morgan.
Thanks a lot, Morgan. Thank you, Kate. Appreciate it. Great conversation this morning.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Morgan, Kate, and Brandon for that great discussion. We also want to give a big thank you to today's sponsor, Transcend, for sponsoring today's program so that it's free to our audience. Lastly, I do want to encourage you to click the survey link that was put in the chat about 5 or so minutes ago and just briefly give us your feedback on today's program. It really helps us to improve our web conference programming, so we certainly do appreciate that. And that wraps up our program here today. So thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope to see you in another IAPP web conference soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.